Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to our Let's Talk Alcohol series. This is actually part 2 in our series, and I want to introduce myself. My name is Shari Egeland. I am from the Associate Director at Omni Youth Programs, which is a individual nonprofit here in Sacramento, California. So thanks again for tuning in. We also have our Let's Talk Pot series, and part 1 of today's series, Let's Talk Alcohol, is available for free on our YouTube page. So you just need to go to YouTube and type in Omni Youth Programs, and you'll see our videos there. You can watch those and share those anytime you want. Well, like I said, today we're going to talk about alcohol. And normally what we do at Omni Youth Programs is we are a prevention agency here in Sacramento County. And basically what that means is our mission is to do everything we can to help support young people, their parents, caregivers, and the whole community really to help young people avoid the use of alcohol, marijuana, and all the other drugs out there, and really empower youth to make the best choice they can for their future. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking about alcohol. Today's part 2 of our Let's Talk Alcohol series. And what we're going to focus on today is a question that I get a lot. Pre-COVID, we would be out in the community a lot, meeting with youth and families, whether at schools and community centers and churches. And a big thing that I hear from youth and I get asked by youth is, isn't alcohol probably the safest drug for me to use? Meaning, like, I think they're really asking, like, hey, I want to use something, so isn't it better to use alcohol than other drugs? And I can understand why young people think that, because really, if you just look at our culture at large, it seems like the adults especially are sending that message, because alcohol is one of the most openly and widely used. Even though other drugs are legal, like nicotine is a drug and marijuana is a drug, you don't really go to a sports game, not lately because of COVID, but back in the day, you don't go to a sports game and see 20,000 people smoking marijuana in the stands, but you do see them drinking alcohol a lot of times. And so it's kind of entrenched in our culture. And young people also tell me, I know my parents don't necessarily want me to drink, but I know that compared to other drugs, they don't really care quite as much about alcohol. So if I'm going to get caught or in trouble doing something, I'd rather it be alcohol. Because if I did meth or cocaine or heroin or anything serious, my parents would absolutely freak. So young people are getting that message, parents, that alcohol just isn't a big deal. And I would say, as a parent or a caregiver or anybody that works with youth, if alcohol is a big deal to you, it's important to talk about that. SAMHSA, SAMHSA.org, has a really good Talk They Hear You campaign that helps with talking tips on that. You can also go to our Sacramento County Coalition for Youth website. They have really good tips. And on our website, omniyouthprograms.net is a really great place to look. We have all kinds of resources and talking tips for parents there too. But let's get back to the subject. Is alcohol a safer drug? Well, that is a tough question. It's kind of like asking, hey, is it safer to give a 5-year-old a knife or matches to play with? And it's like, well, honestly, neither. It's true that maybe a knife might be more readily dangerous. They could do more immediate danger, but I don't think anybody out there is going to say it's safe to let a 5-year-old play with matches, right? Even though it might be harder to do damage, or the damage might come later on. That's kind of how alcohol is. It's a very, very deceptive and kind of tricky drug, because the good effects are felt, almost the blissful kind of feeling that you get from using alcohol are really felt immediately. And you don't see the negative effects a lot of times till much later on. And even if we're not talking about things like being sick or hungover, some of the effects of alcohol are happening in your brain and in your body without you even knowing. To me, a good analogy to describe it is kind of like a haunted house. Halloween, we're 10 days away from Halloween now. And one of my favorite things about Halloween is going into haunted houses, even though I'm a total wuss and I scream the whole time. That's what I like about it. But alcohol's like that. You're cruising along and everything's fine and you think, oh, this is no big deal. I've had a couple beers, I'm feeling pretty good. And all of a sudden, bam, something seems to happen out of nowhere. Or you've had literally one too many. Because the scary thing about alcohol is the amount that it takes to cause somebody to just pass out and then wake up maybe hungover, and the amount it causes for somebody to pass out and never wake up again is very close. There's not a huge difference a lot of times between the amount of alcohol. Sometimes somebody can drink a lot, pass out and be fine. Another person can drink even less than that and they can pass out, and you hear the sad stories all the time of people that don't ever wake up. I really encourage you to check out our YouTube channel, because the first part in our Let's Talk Alcohol series, I did talk about alcohol overdose, how you can tell when somebody's overdosing, and what you can do if you're at a party or you're with somebody that you think might be overdosing. What can you do about that? So I really encourage you to check that out, because I want to get back to alcohol. Alcohol has what's called, when we drink alcohol, our brain releases, because alcohol triggers our brain to release dopamine, which is kind of that feel-good transmitter that makes us feel good. But it also releases serotonin, which makes you feel happy. And some people, it kind of calms you down. It's the calm down transmitter. So it's understandable, especially for young people that might feel stressed or anxiety, why it's really tempting to drink, because it really does those things really quickly. But that's why I want to talk to you about some of the risks involved that you might not know about, and some of the negative effects, so that you can be the judge if those risks are something that's worth taking, and worth risking some of the choices that you may have for your life. Now, let's remember that it is illegal if you're under 20, because we do focus on youth use of alcohol at Omni Youth programs. That's what we're trying to prevent. So it's important that everybody realize it is illegal for young people under the age of 21 to drink alcohol. So that's something that just needs to be understood across the board. No matter if you get the alcohol from your house or if you're at a friend's house and it happens to be in the cupboard, you can't drink if you're under 21. If your parents or another adult purchase the alcohol for you, still illegal. So one thing you definitely want to be aware of with alcohol use, I know we don't talk about it a lot, but you can get in trouble in terms of, law enforcement and getting a record and arrested and stuff. Some of there are some kind of well-known, I guess, or more talked about side effects of alcohol, like having a hangover, how it disrupts your liver, and especially all the dangers that come with drinking and driving, whether to the person driving or to, God forbid, the people that are out while they're driving and they get hurt. Those are definitely serious risks, but I wanted to concentrate today on the things that really don't get as much, say, attention or talked about as much. One of the things is, I'm sure a lot of you who have been around somebody who has drank alcohol, especially kind of drank a lot of alcohol, and they start to slur their speech. That is a lot of times one of the first identifiers to see that somebody may have drank too much alcohol. And why is our speech slurred? Why is that happening? Is it affecting our mouth and the way our mouth moves? No. It's something that's going on in our brain. Alcohol does something to what's called a GABA receptor in our brain. Sounds like something from a science fiction movie, GABA. But basically what GABA is, it's what's called an inhibitory neurotransmitter. I know, a big fun word. But basically, simply explained, what our GABA does is it stops our brain from being able to kind of communicate with itself. It really stops our brain to almost tell us how to speak correctly. Speech is one of the most basic functions that our brain helps us do. It's helping me right now. But because the GABA is increased in our brain, we're not able to do that. It's kind of like if you're on a cell phone and you go from 4 bars to 1 bar, kind of like that. You're just not able to get the information. That's kind of what's happening in your brain. And you'll also notice sometimes that a person who has drank too much or is drunk is kind of falls, stumbles. That's why a lot of times when you see somebody maybe on the side of the road getting pulled over for suspecting of driving under the influence, one of the things they do is have them walk a straight line. because when you're drunk, it's difficult to do that. But why? Why does that happen? Well, the part of the brain that controls coordination, which is called the cerebellum, that's another fun word, kind of sounds like a rock group or something, right? Cerebellum, but no, cerebellum is the part of our brain that it's super sensitive to alcohol. Not only does it control balance, but it's the part of our brain that is more sensitive to alcohol than almost any other. That's why not only can we not walk and stuff, but that's why a lot of times people fall victim to getting hit when they're walking. There's actually something called walking while drinking, and people are more likely to walk out into traffic or not pay attention to traffic signals like green and red. Their body, their cerebellum isn't working properly, so they fall down, they're more likely to get injuries, all kinds of things like that. So it's important to understand another part of our brain. I'm going to throw another science word at you, and then I promise I won't do too many more of them, but our limbic system. Our limbic system is another part that's really sensitive when it comes to alcohol, and you're going to recognize what I'm talking about in a minute. Have you ever seen somebody that has drank a lot of alcohol and they cry? They cry more than they normally would. Or sometimes the opposite, they rage. They have a huge problem with anger when they drink. That's because our limbic system that's involved in regulating our emotions and kind of telling us, hey, you need to chill out a little bit. Those are really affected. So are our emotions. But not only that, here's what else our limbic system does. It is that little part in our brain that says, hey, you probably shouldn't do that. That's dangerous. Don't do that. Or, oh, I like doing this. That makes me happy. Or I don't like doing that. That makes me sad. That's normally how your limbic system is working. But when alcohol's in your brain, it stops your limbic system from being able to do those things. That's why people not only either rage or cry a lot, but they don't make very good decisions a lot of times when they're drinking. They do things when they're drinking that they wouldn't normally ever do. And that brings me to one of the saddest aspects that not a lot is talked about. Do you know that right now, alcohol is responsible for more young people deaths than all other drugs combined? So if all other illegal, well, and really you can include marijuana in there, even though it's not illegal everywhere. But if you include all the deaths from opioids, marijuana, meth, all those things, and just combine all of those, the number of young people under the age of 24 that are killed by alcohol is still higher. In fact, just worldwide, 1 out of every 20 deaths, not just with young people, but with everybody, is alcohol related. Whether it's through disease, injury, accident, murder, or even suicide. And to kind of put that 1 in 20 into perspective, only about 1% of deaths worldwide are from non-alcohol related violence. So we hear things like murder and shootings and all those horrible things, but alcohol by far kills more young people and adults. And it's kind of it's disturbing because remember that the part of it that I said earlier, the part of your brain that helps you, kind of keeps you away from danger and helps you make good choices, that's kind of turned off. Well, unfortunately, that also happens when it comes to sexual activity. There's been a number of studies where they ask college students and they kind of see when or not college students use condoms or protection. And a more recent study found that 75% of college students that say they usually use condoms actually don't use condoms when they're drunk. Isn't that awful? That's so who knows how many STIs, sexually transmitted infections, are out there because of alcohol? Because again, that warning thing that goes off in your brain, like, hey, don't do this, or hey, remember to protect yourself, that's really shut down because of that. And it also another study that's also kind of disturbing, it is a downer for sure, but do you know that 70,000 students every year are assaulted, the assaults that happen are from somebody who was under the influence of alcohol or who was legally intoxicated? And not saying that it's an excuse by any means, or that if you drink, you're going to automatically sexually assault someone. It just means that when somebody does drink, they have a harder time making right decisions for themselves. Again, not an excuse by any means. You still need to be a good human no matter what's happening, but it is something to think about. Another kind of one of the more tragic side effects, and then I'll kind of get off the bummer train here, but basically it's important to understand that alcohol is a depressant. It doesn't seem like it is because sometimes people like woohoo party when they drink, but alcohol is actually a depressant. And so if you're somebody that's struggling with depression, alcohol can actually make that worse. That's why, believe it or not, 1 out of 4 suicide victims in the US are legally intoxicated when they die, at the time of death, when they commit suicide. That's 1 out of 4. So that means 1 out of 4 people that commit suicide are legally intoxicated when they die. And even worse, people who do commit suicide while intoxicated are much more likely to do it in a really violent and really painful way. I'm not sure why that is. But it is something, especially if you know somebody that struggles with depression, it's an important thing to do, to talk to your doctor and be very careful and mindful of your alcohol use, because it actually can make it worse. One more lesser known thing I'm going to talk about, which is kind of interesting, is that, did you know that one of the more common ways people who are intoxicated, other than all the alcohol related stuff we already talked about, one of the more common ways they die is from hypothermia. Surprising, right? Well, hypothermia is basically freezing to death. Not a fun way to go. Why is that? Well, it's actually a myth that alcohol warms you up. Some people think that when they drink, ooh, I feel hot, I feel warm, or your cheeks get really, kind of flooded. But actually, it's a myth. Your core temperature actually is lowered every time you drink alcohol. Drinking alcohol, what it does is it makes your body feel warm, but when reality is happening, your body temperature is dropping because alcohol dilates the blood vessels in your kind of near your skin especially, and it lowers your core temperature. So if you've ever watched, again, a sporting event pre-COVID and you've seen fans that are in the stand and it's like in a Green Bay game and it's snowing outside and everybody's bundled up and there's 1 or 2 guys with their shirts off kind of screaming to the camera. Yeah, those people are not sober, most likely, because they feel warm, but their body is actually cold. So how people die is sometimes they'll be outside especially, and they'll lay down or they'll pass out and not realize that they're cold. And their body temperature drops so much that it actually results in death. So it's something to be careful of, especially if you live in some of the colder areas of our world. It's important to be careful. To keep yourself wrapped up. That frostbite is also common because, again, people aren't noticing that their extremities are too cold. Another thing I wanted to point out for all the athletes out there, and this is the last thing I'm going to talk about, is that did you know that alcohol actually can basically put back your training? So what I mean is, 1 night of drinking, actually the NCAA just did a study on this, 1 night of drinking can actually erase the muscle gain from 1 straight week of training. And this is solid training that you're doing. And that's because it's kind of tricky, but alcohol is very damaging to your muscles. It's really, again, I'm not an MD, so I'm not even going to try to use the words, but basically, alcohol stops your muscles from being able to recover and regenerate and grow. So even if you have an injury, you're more likely to get an injury, and then it's much more difficult to recover if you're somebody that uses alcohol a lot. Now, I said that was the last thing, but I actually forgot to mention something that I found most interesting when I was learning about all this alcohol stuff. The last thing I'm going to mention is, did you know that alcohol use actually shrinks the size of your brain? I didn't know that, but it actually does. The more that somebody uses alcohol, especially somebody that uses alcohol very regularly and to excess, their brains are actually smaller in size and weight than people that do not drink or maybe drink very little. And that's because what I talked about the neurons getting all confused And the problem with having a brain smaller, as you can imagine, there's less activity going on, but also it affects your nervous system when your brain shrinks, because your body doesn't like that, doesn't know what to do about that. And your nervous system pretty much controls almost everything you do every day. So I'm going to wrap up my talk now. And I know a lot of that stuff was kind of a bummer. I hate to bum everybody out so much, but I really hope if you learned something today that maybe you didn't know before, share that with somebody you know. We're going to have this video available on our Facebook page, and it will be available on our YouTube page very shortly. So feel free to use it. And again, check out omniyouth.net for a lot of resources and other upcoming events that we have. And I want to say thank you to Nicole. So nice to see you, Nicole. We're here from you, actually. One of our volunteers from back in the day. Thank you so much. And Jeannie, thank you so much for tuning in. And Cynthia, you're always so great with all your comments. She thinks Cerebellum sounds like a rock group too. We both think that. But thank you again so much for everybody to tune in. And I did put my email address in the descriptor of this video. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for tuning in.